Merci beaucoup d'être ici cet après-midi. It's really a pleasure to moderate this session with two great participants. Let me briefly introduce them to you. Mircea Geoana, Deputy Secretary General NATO, was here in this house about a year ago, shortly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to try and help us understand, walk us through the implications for NATO. Long and distinguished career. He's been a former foreign minister of Romania. Nobody's perfect, Geoana. Mircea.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. President of Romanian Senate, president of the Social Democrat Party in Romania, first Deputy Secretary General of NATO from a country that joined NATO after the end of the Cold War. Next to him, we have a very important person today, important in many respects, Muriel Domenach. She's the ambassador, permanent representative of France to NATO, long and distinguished career in France's foreign service, but for today's discussion, a Sciences Po alumni. So watch her, because this is what happens to you when you're a good student in Sciences Po, that you get to represent the interests of your country at the highest levels in NATO. So we are going to, as we always do, I will ask first Mircea to share with us a few thoughts. It's over a year now that Russia invaded Ukraine. What has changed in NATO? Then we'll go to Muriel. I'll ask them a couple of questions and then start getting ready, because we'll pass the floor quickly to you. If this is okay with everyone, Mircea.
Yes, ma'am.
À toi.
Merci Arantxa. Ce fut l'idée de Muriel de venir ensemble ici. This is my amphitheater. Because I was, a few years back, student of l'École nationale d'administration. The headquarters belong to us. And this is my amphitheater, so I'm happy to go back in time. And I remember the French students going on strike because they wanted to move the school to Strasbourg. Et les Français s'y connaissent à ces trucs militants. So for me, it's very emotional. Last time when we went 1 year ago, we were in a big amphitheater, not here, but this is really full of emotion for me. I was your age. And I encourage you to stay the course, attend this great school that you're attending, and the sky is the limit for you, my dear young friends. The sky is the limit for all of you. So I'm so happy to be here. It's really emotional. I remember 1 year ago sitting on stage with Pascal Lamy, a dear friend and a superb intellectual. Also Victoria Molnar, she's here with you, a Ukrainian student from Sciences Po. She was making the case for this great, brave nation of Ukraine. And if they're calling me, tell me that I'm busy. Dragoș, please, thank you. So what happened in 1 and a few months year time? First, I think all can recognize that Ukraine has been shown immense bravery, immense courage, immense resilience, immense ingenuity, immense sense of national destiny. And there is something that Mr. Putin has got it wrong, but totally wrong. It was his initial belief that Ukraine doesn't exist as a nation. Before Crimea, before the occupation of Crimea, illegal occupation in 2014, 80-something% of Ukrainians believe that Russia is the closest friend to Ukraine, for many reasons. Now 90% of Ukrainians believe that Russia is an existential threat to Ukraine. So this is really a big consequence, because this is national mythology. Generation after generation of Ukrainians, they will speak of their great war. They will speak of their fathers and grandparents that died, that sacrificed themselves under such brutal, vicious attacks by Russia. So the first conclusion after 1 year, that we have now a Ukrainian nation forged in battle, fierce, resilient, and uncompromising about its freedom and sovereignty. There's nothing short of formidable. And I think we should applaud this nation because this has been a very difficult year for them. The second lesson for us, and this is where je crois que si Muriel va être d'accord avec moi, it is the incredible unity of the political West when it comes to helping Ukraine. And this is probably the second miscalculation of Mr. Putin, believing that the West is weak, is decadent, is fractured, then European and North American allies will go in different ways. I've seen this alliance, I think, is more united than we have been in many, many years, and this is something that I believe is also a very important consequence. The third lesson that I think we can draw is that we have in face of us a new definition of security, which goes beyond deterrence and defense, which encompasses cyber, disinformation campaigns, hybrid warfare, space, resilience, supply chains, public narratives. So what we are now witnessing is, in fact, after 1 and something months of war, that in fact is not just the war in Ukraine, it's a massive transversal war that Russia is waging against Ukraine and also against the friends of Ukraine. And resilience is a big word that I would like to leave with you because that's about societal resilience. It's not only resilience in military terms, or after the pandemic to bounce back, but it's about how we as citizens, as civil society, as NGOs, as universities, as businesses, as governments, local and national or international organizations like NATO or the European Union are looking like. Fourth conclusion for me. This war has brought NATO and the European Union closer together. I have the privilege, as being also a former foreign minister of Romania, my nation is also a NATO proud member and a very proud EU member state. And I think that we are now, and if you could read the third joint declaration between NATO and the EU, you'll be seeing that we are working together on cyber, on resilience, on new technologies, on space, on China, on many other things. Fifth, and something which is more complex, is that the rest of the world is not looking this war through the same lenses, with the same eyes like we do in Europe and across, if you want, the traditional political West, in Europe and also elsewhere. And you see, for reasons that can be discussed, big important nations from the rest of the world that are not looking at this war with the same lenses like we do. And I believe personally that it's not the fact that they don't understand that this is a blatant aggression and this is against the UN Charter, but because they still see this war as sort of an intra-European, a sort of a Western kind of thing, which is our problem, not their problem. And they're trying in a way to find a way under the sun that will put them in a better position in the future because there is a new world order in the making. We say to, and probably the students from all over the world, not only from European nations or from our part of the world, that even if this war is European, the consequences of this war are global. And not only because of food security or energy security, but also because the way in which we'll respond to aggression will be the way in which the future of the world will look like. Do we live in a world with norms and rules, or we live in a world where force and brute force and military might makes right? So this war is a European war, by definition, geographically speaking, but it's a consequence because the way in which we'll respond to this war, and as Secretary General Stoltenberg says, what happens today in Europe could happen tomorrow in Asia, or in Africa, or elsewhere, or in space, where competition is intensifying as well. So this will be a few of my initial comments. telling you one thing, that our Ukrainian friends need our support. They deserve our support. They earned our support. They earned our respect. And this is not, at least I say this as a Romanian that lives in a geography that has been seeing aggression many times, that I'm proud of my organization, of NATO, how we responded to this crisis. I'm proud of Ukrainians, I'm proud of us, and I'm proud of also the ally nations, starting with France, which is a leading military force and also a leading nation in NATO, European Union, in world affairs. So I don't know if Victoria Monar is here to listen to us. Victoria, if you're not here and you're online, I say hello because I was impressed last year when you presented the case of your great nation. So, muchísimas gracias, señora ministra.
Thank you so much. Let me say that the students are now doing, this is the most terrible moment for students in this place, is when they do the exams. So I'm sure that Victoria is somewhere, but we will pass her your message. Muriel, Mircea nous a décrit un peu les changements qu'on a vus à l'OTAN suite à l'invasion russe de l'Ukraine. Comment est-ce qu'on voit ces changements du poste d'un État membre de l'OTAN, d'un État membre qui est très important et un peu différent des autres États membres, membre permanent du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies, armes nucléaires, les seules dans l'Europe continentale à l'avoir, dans l'Union européenne à l'avoir. Comment est-ce que vous décrirez cette année et quelques qui s'est écoulée du point de vue de la France?
Merci Madame la Ministre, merci Madame la Doyenne, Arantxa, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général délégué. C'est un honneur pour moi de m'adresser à vous. Je le fais dans l'autre langue de l'Alliance, le français. Vous savez qu'il y a 2 langues à l'OTAN. I stand ready to answer questions in English and will navigate anyway. D'abord, je vais vous dire, je vais vous apporter une mauvaise nouvelle, mais vous la connaissez sans doute. C'est que vous êtes la génération du retour de la guerre en Europe. Et c'est important que vous l'entendiez de ma part à moi, qui suis la génération un peu au-dessus, la génération des dividendes de la paix, en présence de Mircea, et j'aurais pas la cuistrerie de qualifier la doyenne, mais Mircea, je me permettrai de dire que tu es la génération de la fin de la guerre froide. Et finalement, la génération de Mircea est peut-être mieux armée que la mienne pour comprendre les fondamentaux de ce qui va être le contexte stratégique de votre génération. Ma génération, lorsque j'avais votre âge dans cet amphithéâtre, qu'il est émouvant pour moi de retrouver, puisque c'était l'amphithéâtre de l'ENA, c'était la génération des dividendes de la paix. C'est-à-dire, on est à la fin de l'histoire avec une victoire majeure de la démocratie, du libéralisme économique et de la paix, avec des poches d'instabilité, bien entendu, et ma génération est celle des Balkans des années 90. Penser qu'il puisse y avoir une guerre à 2 heures de Paris qui engage nos intérêts et nos valeurs, mais pas notre sécurité directement. Parce qu'on était français, on savait devoir payer des impôts pour la dissuasion nucléaire. La dissuasion nucléaire qui, vous savez, est vraiment un caractère distinctif de la politique de défense française. Et c'est sans doute la dissuasion qui a à la fois contribué à maintenir un effort de défense conséquent en France, les responsabilités ailleurs dans le monde, dans la gestion des crises aussi, mais aussi à maintenir un esprit de défense. La dissuasion, évidemment, la doyenne y faisait référence, c'est ce qui donne à la France sa spécificité sur la scène internationale, dans la fidélité à nos alliances, mais sa spécificité. J'ai emmené le Conseil de l'Atlantique Nord à l'île Longue. Earlier this month, I took the took the North Atlantic Council to visit Ilong, where our ocean strategic force stays. They had the occasion to visit nuclear submarines, and certainly the specificity of France when it comes to NATO also lies there. We are less dependent than others when it comes to our life guarantee. This said, and this is the French ambassador to NATO that would like to insist on a threefold message. La revitalisation des enjeux de défense en Europe, parce qu'il y a le retour de la guerre, one. Two, the revitalization of NATO in this context, precisely because of war in Europe and collective defense being the primary focus of and primary mission of NATO. And three, the reinvestment of NATO by France, le réinvestissement de l'OTAN par la France. La revitalisation de la mission de défense collective, je crois que vous la comprenez naturellement de ce qu'indiquait le secrétaire général délégué, alors que l'OTAN, pendant les années 90, était allée dans la gestion de crise, out of area. C'était la période où on dépensait moins pour notre défense et on se projetait pour aller gérer des crises. Et at the time, NATO was doing a lot of soul searching. Out of area, otherwise NATO would go out of business. Donc il y avait tout ce débat sur le out of area, l'engagement en Afghanistan, avec le retour d'une menace très claire sur le flanc oriental. La mission de l'OTAN de défense collective se trouve reconfirmée. C'est clair, notre vocation, c'est d'assurer la défense de every inch of the alliance territory. Hence, the centrality of NATO, which primary mission is deterrence and defense. Alors même que nous continuions à engager la Russie dans le dialogue, nous préparions aussi le renforcement de la dissuasion et de la défense sur le flanc oriental. Rien n'est plus faux que de penser que l'administration Biden a cherché à provoquer la Russie, ou que l'OTAN a cherché à provoquer la Russie. Quite to the contrary, until the last minute, NATO has been reaching out to Russia. Mircea and I seated at the last NATO-Russia Council on the 13th of January 2022 with Russia, until the last minute trying to answer and do outreach with regard to its alleged security concerns. En même temps, on préparait le renforcement de la posture de défense et de dissuasion qu'on a mise en œuvre après le 24 février. La France, dans ce contexte, comme à chaque fois que les circonstances l'exigent, a répondu présent. Nous nous sommes déployés, vous le savez, en Roumanie, où nous avons pris la responsabilité de la présence de l'OTAN. Vous savez que la Roumanie a sous ton contrôle, Mircea, 800 km de frontières avec l'Ukraine. Elle est donc sur la ligne de front. Et en fait, il y avait une présence de l'OTAN en Estonie, Lettonie, Lituanie, Pologne, mais moins en Roumanie et Bulgarie. La France s'est déployée en moins de 4 jours en Roumanie. Et présidence de l'Union européenne à l'époque, nous avons activement concouru à la coordination transatlantique dans la réponse à Vladimir Poutine. Je peux témoigner de cette unité. L'ensemble des alliés, à une exception, applique des sanctions importante envers la Russie. L'ensemble des alliés, à une exception, livre des armes à l'Ukraine. Le soutien à l'Ukraine, c'est notre responsabilité morale, c'est également notre intérêt. Ce soutien va s'inscrire dans la durée. On aura un sommet à Vilnius les 11 et 12 juillet, lors duquel on aura l'occasion, en présence du président Zelensky, de marquer ce soutien.
Merci, merci Muriel. Let me, Mircea, you mentioned that a war in Ukraine has brought unity to the West, but disunity with the rest. Now, what is it that the West can do to make sure that this unity is not just among like-minded, but there is a greater understanding across the world for the position that the alliance has taken in this war? What did we do wrong? What did you do wrong? What is it that we need to do better?
Tout d'abord, merci Muriel pour tes propos. Sont très, très, très relevants pour cette conversation. I forgot to mention that one of the effects of Russia's, let's say, bogus strategic calculation before the war that we have Finland and shortly Sweden as new members of NATO. And there is something that I want to say from my position, that we never lobbied Finland or Sweden to join NATO, never ever. Finland has been a neutral country since the Second World War, and Sweden has been a neutral country from 1812, quand l'un des frères de l'empereur Bonaparte, Napoléon, a été installé. Et la dynastie est toujours là. So, when it comes to Europe, things are clear. Russia is dangerous, war is possible again in Europe, and we have to prepare for that. But what Arantxa is basically asking is a very important question. And I don't think that Ukraine is the only moment when the rest of the world, bigger or smaller nations around the world, outside of the traditional political West, have been raising questions about how the West is engaging them. Mm-hmm. And there is a combination of colonial resentment, of non-alignment movements, and many nations are sincerely, like India, sincerely part of a policy of non-alignment. And alliances, military alliances for them, they are something that they look with a certain distance. But I would say that what we should try to do is first to show more humility and listen. Sometimes I have the feeling, also as a Romanian, that sometimes there is a tendency to preach and to tell them what they should do, these nations, when these nations, I think they're smart enough and mature enough to also think with their own heads what they need to do. And I think we have to show a capacity to listen and to be a little more humble. Doesn't mean that we don't have, knowledge and skills and resources that they need. But I think first is a matter of attitude. This is a world of equals that we have to really look into, and I think this is the first thing. It's a psychological, it's a political, it's attitude. And my dear young friends, sometimes in life, attitude, the way you behave and you act, not only in verbal terms, but also in terms of non-verbal things, is as important as the policy you're presenting. The second thing is something more practical and more pragmatic. This is a shift in the balance of power in the world. We say it in a strategic concept of NATO that I encourage you to read. It's a very short, condensed, exceptionally bright strategic document that we adopted in Madrid last year. And we say that we have entered a era of great power competition and an era of pervasive instability. So many nations are pragmatically trying to get a better seat at a big table, which is now reorganizing itself. So sometimes when you hear from some leaders from other nations that they have a little bit of ambiguity around the definition of the war of aggression that Russia started against Ukraine, sometimes is not only a misunderstanding of the UN Charter. UN Charter is very clear. War is war, aggression is aggression, sovereignty and independence, they are clear. But sometimes, in the attempt to find a better deal for themselves, they're trying to play the game of hedging and the game in a way to really find a better place under the sun, which is again something that national leaders and nations in general are always, supposed to be doing. And the third thing, there is something which is, I think, even more important. We have entered the era of hypersonic technological revolution. The changes of technology are so incredible, potent, and intertwined. I chair the Innovation Council of Board of NATO. I can tell you firsthand how complex AI, big data, biotech, new propulsion, outer space, cyberspace are for all of us. So I think the rest of the world is saying, okay, who's going to get me access to technology and finance to develop my country at the same level that you'll be developing your own nations? So behind that is also a new economic contract, and a new global social contract, a new global environmental compact. And many of these nations say, okay, you developed industrial nations, you've polluted for centuries, now you're fine, and you tell us that we should pollute less because of this. So we have to find, for the common goods, Arantxa, a real, more honest, sincere conversation about everybody has a stake, everybody has a say, and for us, I think we have to be a little bit more humble, listen, and understand they have all the right in the world to try to find a better position for themselves and their nations and their citizens, like we have for ours. So that will be my complex answer to a very difficult question that we are trying to find a solution in NATO and also in the EU, I think, together.
Thank you, Mircea. Muriel, one of the things that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has triggered is also a stronger sense in the European Union about its defense and security. What would you say is the articulation between Europe's security and defense and NATO's one? Mircea has said that there's been an unprecedented synergizing of the two efforts. How does it look like from where you sit?
It's a key question. Complementarity. Sorry, merci. Complementarity between NATO and the EU based on empowerment of Europeans. And let me again come back to my key message in the beginning. For those of you that are citizens of the EU, the bad news is la brutalisation du monde. You will have to face that music. The good news is this is a European Union that at last, woke up from its strategic nap. L'Union européenne s'est réveillée de sa sieste stratégique. Member states realized we have to step up in terms of our defense efforts if we want to stay relevant to the US. And the EU itself, I'm speaking under the control of those that operated the EU as ministers, realized that, yes, there's treaties and everything, but at the end of the day, you might wish to achieve political results with whatever you agreed in terms of the treaties, namely the peace facility that was meant to support defense cooperation in Africa, ended up being used to provide weapons. It took us 1 week after the invasion, and that I think we can recognize the leadership of the then presidency of the time. It took us 1 week to agree within the EU to use the peace facility to provide lethal material to Ukraine. This is significant, both in institutional terms and from member states. Now, clearly, there's an ongoing debate within the EU on how we should position ourselves as Europeans. A lot of this controversy has little to do with comme on dit, le ni avec toi ni sans toi envers les États-Unis. All of us wish that the US would stay with us, starting with France, while our nuclear deterrence is fully independent. So we don't rely on the US for our life guarantee. Still, we also rely on the US when it comes to strategic transportation, when it comes to intelligence cooperation and everything. Our interest, just like the rest of everyone, is to have the US committed to the security of Europe. Now, all of you will be following, I suppose, I will be following the election year in the US, and of course hoping, county by county, that politicians that are close to our options and multilateralism and commitment to the security of Europe will make it. But at the end of the day, how do I explain my kids that yes, on est en prière en espérant que le comté de la banlieue de Miami va voter dans le sens de nos intérêts de sécurité. That doesn't work. And also, another music we have to face is that le barycentre géopolitique du monde, et notamment pour les États-Unis, se déplace vers l'Indo-Pacifique. Doesn't mean that the US will turn away from the security of Europe. I think to the contrary. But we should not expect the US, one, to peter out every fire in our own gardens, and two, let's be realistic, the US will not increase its security presence in Europe, while there actually is a need to step up. So it's for us Europeans, if we want to be faithful to our responsibilities, but also if we want to stay as relevant allies to the US, to step up. And I see this effort as mutually beneficial to the transatlantic alliance. And yes, it's probably easier for the French ambassador to argue that at times we might have to defend our own interests than for others. I realize that. And yes, it is for the French also, not only for the West, pas seulement à l'Occident, de se décentrer, parfois à la France, de se décentrer pour comprendre les autres Européens, especially the Europeans that are the most exposed. But yes, there is a way, il y a un chemin de complémentarité.
Thank you very much. The floor to you. So, mics on both sides of the aisle, as usual. You say who you are and you say what you want to ask, put to the panel. Start with the gentleman over there.
If we look at arms exports in terms of GDP, it's clear that the east of Europe is exporting much more to Ukraine than the West. And if we talk of strategic autonomy in this hall and we say we shouldn't rely on the US, then my simple question is, why isn't Western Europe doing its fair part? I mean, if everyone was contributing as much as Poland or the Baltic states, I'm pretty sure the war would be over by now, and yet we don't see this happening. So this talk has been going on for a year. I apologize for the undiplomatic question, but where else to ask it if not here? Because I don't see a real change happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question. You'll become a politician. That's I can smell it from here. Listen, unity doesn't mean uniformity. And let's look at the numbers. The support for Ukraine is multifaceted. US is dwarfing everyone else when it comes to military aid, 65 billion euros. But also the Europeans, all of us, in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, in Southern Europe, in Northern Europe, we have been also helping a lot Ukraine militarily, financially, 50%. And we have here an exceptional, not only diplomat and politician and a leader, but also who knows numbers. In order to keep the macroeconomic stability of Ukraine every month, to pay the salaries, to pay the pensions, there's a huge amount of money that comes into Ukraine every day, from all of us, from Germany, from France, from the UK, from everyone else. So when I'm saying unity, it doesn't mean that it's basically one size fits all. Some countries have larger arsenals, others have less stocks. Iceland doesn't have an army, and they help with transportation for equipment to Ukraine. So I know I'm also coming from the East, and sometimes there is a temptation to say we are doing and the others are not doing. No, all of us are doing our best. Look at the Ramstein process. 50 plus nations around the world are helping Ukraine with military support. But if you want to talk about this after that, I'll give you a crash course on politics, and I hope you'll be better than I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I might add
Of
to
course.
this few points. Your question on the sort of new Europe, old Europe, like the eastern flank is the new Europe. I get this perspective, and again, clearly, I took my kids on vacation to your country 3 years ago, precisely because I wanted them to see Europe from the northeastern. It was well before the war began, but I want my kids to grow up in a Europe where they understand how it feels to have the Russians in your back. And also the history and the Freedom Museum in Tallinn, I wanted them to see. So totally understand your perspective. And yes, to some extent, there's a new Europe that is becoming more of the center of gravity. At the same time, I think it's not fair to underestimate that Ukraine's resilience lies to a large extent on the shoulders of Germany, and I'm saying this as a French diplomat, having lived through tunnels of Germany bashing. La résilience de l'Ukraine, en ce moment, c'est l'Union européenne. Et l'Union européenne, ça veut dire en grande partie l'Allemagne, all tributes being paid. Last point, and you will hear that a lot from the French, but also from a lot of the strategic experts. Had it not been for nuclear deterrence, none of this massive arms transfers, and I'm not even mentioning the notion that some of the eastern flank countries had Soviet stocks and blah, 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 so it made it easier for them, that they're so dependent when it comes to their security anyways, that a little bit more, a little bit less doesn't change much. No, my point is nuclear deterrence as the best protection against coercion. Do you think for a minute that the Russians ignore where the arms transit? No, of course. They know exactly. So the reason why everyone is transferring arms safely to Ukraine is because nuclear deterrence is sort of protecting arms transfer as the representative of one of the three countries that contribute to the security of the alliance and the protection of these arms transfers. I would kindly ask that nuclear deterrence is factored in the strategic context.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very insightful. My name is Andrea. I'm a student in international governance and diplomacy. And I wanted to start from the scenario, the likely scenario of a possible US disengagement from Europe. So I know I'm kind of oversimplifying like in this way, but what would be from your point of view, the best direction to, let's say, reach some kind of, I won't say strategic autonomy, but a strengthening of the European defense capabilities, because there have been numerous possibilities, like from a European pillar of NATO or something, facilities within the European Union, but then there is the issue of whether to include, how to include the United Kingdom and so on. So what is your opinion on that?
Thank you for the question. First, I don't share the view that American involvement in Europe or in the world depends on one election. Not true. That's sometimes easy to portray America like a sort of a country that one election, of course elections change directions of nations, including your country. It happens, that's democracy. But today, 80% of Americans say that NATO is a great alliance, 80%, 80%. Americans, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and everything in between the spectrum of public opinion in America, they realize that it's good to have allies. If there is something that the US has that China will never have, and China has lots of assets, size, economy, drive, many things, is that China is relatively, other than Russia and a few others that don't have allies, America has lots of allies. And the number one place of alliance is NATO. Would they need to put more attention to the Indo-Pacific? Yes. I think we also should. So I'm not in the camp of saying that America will disengage. Having said that, and Muriel was right when saying that we were in Europe a little bit, c'était commode to have the Americans protecting us and for us to basically not invest in our own defense. I have to tell you a piece of news. Security costs money. And if you want to have a slogan about how independent and sovereign you want to be, show me your money. And then I'll start believing that you really want to be more autonomous. If not, it's political conversation. Economic security is becoming the norm in today's and tomorrow. Your world will be defined by economic security, not only by military security. There will be a premium on security for governments, for businesses, and for society. The world, and we believe that we are in a sort of a romantic, post-modern world, that also the European model of society will be convincing everyone else will do nothing. It's over. So the strategic awakening means that we have to invest more. Together with North America, together with UK, together with Norway, also the non-EU countries. We need each other more than ever. So I'm not saying that Europe should not more. We should do more. We should spend more. We should do more. But not in the idea is a zero-sum game. It's not. And Americans, Republicans, and Democrats realize that it's good to have allies and friends. And NATO is the best place when you have the largest number of friends. And also Japan and Australia and Korea and Thailand and the Philippines and many others around the world. So that's the plus that we have. We have to convince the rest of the world. That's the problem. Not to convince ourselves that we need each other. What about the rest of the world? And I think that's where the game will be played. If the Indias, of the Brazils, if the Nigerias, if the South Africas of the world, or the Egypts of the world, how do they see us and how do they position themselves in the world? So spend more.
Merci. We go to the gentleman over there.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is Guido from Italy. It's a great honor to be here in front of you. And I would say that emerging and disrupting technologies are reshaping the world of military affairs in an unprecedented way. And I would say that according to my understanding, this is happening at every level of NATO, so at the tactical, operational, and strategic level. And as you've mentioned, these involves the role of artificial intelligence. Now, I would love to hear your opinion, your personal opinion about what should be the philosophy behind linking artificial intelligence and deterrence, so at the strategic level, meaning if you see a future in which deterrence is guaranteed by a fully automation of it, or if artificial intelligence will remain positioned in a, let's say, midway, so being an enabler of decision making, such as, for example, a visualization tool of threats, or if the management of deterrence will remain fully based on human taken decisions. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, my dear friend, for that question. That's a fundamental question because this will shape the world that you'll be living in. Us now, of course, the older generations, but you will be basically living in a world that will be transformed by this incredibly accelerated transformation of technology. And what we are seeing from NATO is that basically every single new technology, disruptive technology, is dual use. Is civilian for good purposes, for healthcare, for economic development, for empowerment of human beings. But the same technology in a ubiquitous way can also be the opposite. The dark side of the moon and the sunny side of the moon are coexisting. What we do in NATO, and we are very proud that for the AI strategy for NATO, we have also added automatically a responsible ethical use of that thing. Because if AI, big data, and tomorrow quantum will be left only for the markets or for governments to be used, the temptation to be abused will just be immense. And I'm afraid as somebody a little bit more mature than you, my dear young friends, that we're also living an existential threat for human species if we don't do it right. Because the volume of damage that these technologies combined can do is nothing short of immense. Thirdly, and that's my last observation, which is superficial, I'm not only seeing AI and big data moving forward and, the AI and the discussion how to use it, I'm seeing also a confluence, a convergence between AI, big data, quantum, which is coming towards before the end of this decade, my young friends. This will be becoming fully commercial. And third, biotechnology and human sciences are making so much progress. So I'm seeing the three, AI, big data, quantum, and biotech and related coming in one piece. And I'm afraid that this will be very difficult for any government, or any business, and probably any organization to be doing this. So we need a new compact for new technologies in the world. If not, it's going to be a lot of progress, but also be immense danger down the road. And I hope we'll be able to have the wisdom and the intellectual and political capacity to find a balanced way to move forward on these ones.
Muriel, do you want to chip in? No? Okay, so the gentleman over there, and then I'll go. Thank you so much, the lady over there. Please.
Thank you very much for your speech. I have a question to both of you. First, French President Emmanuel Macron said that we should not humiliate Russia. But what does that mean realistically? Does it mean that the Crimean question should be sort of solved differently, or does it mean that when the war is over, Russia would be sort of within the system of NATO engaged, or does NATO see Russia as a sort of existential threat for the decades and decades to go? And the second question is that how to prevent
only
revanchism?
one question. If you put two, then the lady has no chance. One question. So, Muriel. Sorry, that's my prerogative as the moderator.
Right, looking forward to a question from a female student. So answering your question on President Macron's point on Russia, I think it is to be understood in the context of Russia's narrative that it was humiliated by the West, and that poor little thing, c'était très difficile de voir l'élargissement de l'OTAN. They felt threatened, and the reality is that if some of you have read Le Mage du Kremlin by Giuliano da Empoli, votre concitoyen, monsieur. If there is one thing to be retained from that book and any serious work on Russia, it was about Russia humiliated itself because of its elites, corrupt elites and the culture of violence within the Russian society. And yes, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russian population, Russian society had a strong feeling of humiliation. I was myself a student. I speak Russian. I traveled to the former USSR at that time. And yes, the feeling of humiliation was real in the Russian society. So to not play in the Russian narrative is one thing. And not give Russia the occasion to instrumentalize, our posture as the alliance. Now, the other thing you should read, so the humiliation rhetorics is real. And this needs to be factored in how we approach Russia. Not that we humiliated Russia, but the narrative is there, and it's Russia's elites that humiliated their society. That's how I see things. The other thing you might read into that is from the head of state of a nuclear power, but also from the head of state of a European power. Russia will stay there. And if I read also Jens Stoltenberg's comments every time he's asked about Russia, and as a good Norwegian, if I may, he's aware Russia's not going to move. Russia will be there. There is no option of, the end of World War II with Hitler killing himself in a bunker. We'll have to deal with Russia at some point. So that's what you should read to those comments. Yes, the humiliation narrative is there, so it's for us to also fight the narrative in terms of influence, fight against disinformation and everything. And two, yes, strategic issues are there, and yes, Russia will stay there with a major nuclear arsenal. No more than that. We were clear that Russia should be defeated in Ukraine. We're doing our utmost to empower Ukraine. Shortly, air defense will be delivered, the most sophisticated Santé, together with the Italians. We've been we were the first to deliver light battle tanks to Ukraine, and it's our interest that Ukraine wins. We are clear about that.
I will answer very, very shortly, because Muriel, I think, gave a very interesting answer. First, Russia is a country of 11 time zones. So encircling Russia is relatively difficult by any standard. So this is propaganda. As I mentioned, we have not talked to Helsinki and Stockholm to come to join NATO, just we feel threatened by Russia, full stop. Secondly, Russia is a European power, is also a Eurasian power. And they have to decide if they want to be a responsible European player or to be an autocratic Eurasian player. It's up to them, not to us. They decoupled from civilized Europe, not us decoupled from them. So when they realized that it's a lose-lose proposition, what they've been entering into, why not resume conversation? Until then, it's very difficult to think of. The only thing I believe the leadership of that country understands is probably something that you study in your grade school, is cost-benefit analysis. and to realize that the cost of continuing this bloody war against Ukraine for Russia, for its economy, for its standing in the world, for its poor kids that are coming back in coffins by tens of thousands, and when they will realize that this is a war that cannot be won and is also, in terms of efficiencies, cost benefit is bad, I think at that moment they might be interested in finding a way out of this thing that they started, and they're the ones who have to stop it. If they decide to stop this war, this will be finalized in 1 second. We stop the war is over. And I think the Ukrainians have all the right in the world to defend their land and to be a proud, sovereign, independent nation in Europe.
Thank you. We're going to take, because we're getting to the end of it, we're going to quickly take your questions. If you formulate them shortly and crisply, we can get the four of you in, okay? Good.
Okay, hi. My name's Yeva, so I am a student in international security, but more importantly, I'm a Lithuanian. So if any Latvian wants to come up to finish the Baltic Alliance, come in. To the real things, right now as we speak, Russia is presiding the UN Security Council. Sergei Lavrov just finished a speech at the UN, and we all know what the Russian playbook really is. It's normalization of aggression, frozen conflict. In 2022, we saw a 300% increase in cyber attacks in NATO countries compared to 2020. And I think this is very, very important to note down. And my question is, what is NATO prepared to do to ensure that Ukraine is A, not forgotten, its territory is not slowly trickled away in a frozen conflict, and two, what are we going to do to ensure that cyber attacks do not continue being the new normal?
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Thank you both very much for being here. So now over a year into the war in Ukraine, it seems to me at least that the Russian military is weaker than it's ever been just by virtue of this war. So I guess my question is, what countries does NATO see as threats to it? What is NATO protecting against today now that we have a weaker Russian military than ever without deploying a single NATO troop?
Thank you. Lady behind.
Okay. Je vais poser la question en français. J'espère que ça ne vous dérange pas. Moi, je suis étudiante roumaine. Je suis en première année de master en administration publique à l'école d'affaires publiques et je vous remercie d'avoir partagé toutes ces idées pour nous. C'était vraiment enrichissant de vous entendre. Et moi, j'aurais une question plus pragmatique parce que le retour de la guerre en Europe nous a choqués tous. Et c'est très important pour moi d'avoir une vision à long terme. C'est pourquoi on se rappelle tous des idées de Fukuyama qui parlait après la fin de la guerre froide, de la fin de l'histoire et en fait du fait que le libéralisme a gagné. Mais on voit bien qu'il y a beaucoup de régimes autoritaires qui connaissent l'essor, comme M. Geoana a parlé d'un sort de sentiment anti-occidental de la part des pays hors Europe. C'est pourquoi je vais vous demander quels sont les scénarios de la fin de cette guerre, parce que l'Union européenne, parce que l'OTAN s'est si impliquée, a donné beaucoup d'aide à l'Ukraine. Et je crois qu'en fait, une défaite de l'Ukraine sera une défaite de l'Union européenne et de l'OTAN, et ce qui n'est plus envisageable. Et je crois que pour nous tous, parce qu'on est tous jeunes, et donc on va vivre la fin de cette guerre, et je crois que c'est très important d'avoir votre vision sur comment concilier au niveau international tous les pays après la fin de la guerre, parce qu'on voit bien qu'il y a beaucoup de mesures protectionnistes économiques, comme c'était le cas de l'Inflation Reduction Act de l'Union européenne, et le multilatéralisme semble de plus en plus dégradé. C'est pourquoi, pour moi, c'est très important d'avoir des solutions concrètes et comment pourrons-nous travailler ensemble dans le futur pour pouvoir accomplir les buts qu'ils envisagent toute la planète, comme la transition numérique ou la transition écologique. Je vous remercie.
Oui, j'avais dit des questions pointues, mais là, on est parti, on a agrandi les zooms. Monsieur, last question for you.
Thank you so much for this talk. I apologize if this is a provocative question, but what, according to you, would be the end game in Ukraine? Is it a restoration of all the territories that have been seized by Russia? And if it is indeed so, including Crimea also here, do you think that the NATO alliance and the transatlantic alliance will sustain in the pursuit of these goals as well, or somewhere down the line, the peace plan as put forward by China or other countries, say India, will also come into consideration?
Thank you very much. On this happy note.
Oui, bien sûr.
Vas-y.
Je vais le premier.
Mircea.
Sur la fin de la guerre, facile.
Okay, very quickly. Thank you for the questions. First, when we speak about Ukraine, we also are seeing learning lessons from what happened in Ukraine. We've seen how Russia has cyber-attacked the satellites of Ukraine, trying to cripple the telecommunications just before the war started in February last year. And we've seen an incredible coalition between private business, Starlink, between government, business, and civil society. And I think in a way, in a very tragic way, in a very awful way, in a very barbaric way, we see a beginning of a new economic and resilience model that we are learning from Ukraine, and I think will be lessons learned also for us. I also run cyber adaptation in NATO. It's very difficult, and you always seem to be running behind the curve because things are moving so fast. But we take disinformation and cyber and hybrid. I'm also saying a word, just a one sentence about the Republic of Moldova and Georgia and the Western Balkans. They are also under immense pressure from Russia. The Republic of Moldova is under basically a total hybrid war from Russia, not military war, but hybrid war. So I think they also need, together with the European Union, the support. I'm very happy that Maia Sandu, the President of Moldova, will be hosting the summit of the European Political Community in Chișinău on June 1st. We need to help these countries choose on their own what's the future. Which are the threats? For NATO, Russia continues to be a threat. Even if their military is now weakened, they have the capacity to come back. They have capacity to produce more. They have the capacity to suffer. So that's why Russia and terrorism are the two threats. One, conventional, another, let's say, more asymmetric, like terrorists. These are the two big threats that we see. Ma chère amie roumaine, merci pour le français, merci pour la question. J'espère que tu vas revenir en Roumanie pour nous aider de rebâtir l'administration publique en Roumanie. En effet, une autre leçon de l'Ukraine, c'est le fait que nous avons maintenant pas seulement un assaut délibéré de la part de la Russie et de la Chine contre l'ordre mondial que nous avons bâti sur des règles, mais il y a également, comme toujours dans l'histoire, ça ne va jamais finir l'histoire, de la compétition des idées. Ce que nous avons maintenant, c'est une compétition entre les idées de comment organiser la société humaine. Quel contrat social? Quel modèle économique? Quel type de politique? Quel type de culture? Quel type d'avenir? Et pour ça, aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas seulement l'Ukraine. Ce n'est pas seulement le partenariat stratégique sans limite entre la Russie et la Chine. Et si vous allez retrouver dans le discours du président Xi, et c'est un président d'un grand pays, il a dit d'une manière expressis verbis dans son discours au congrès de son parti, and I say it in English, that China is proposing an alternative pathway for development to the world. So I lived in communism half of my life. Donc, je crois que ce n'est pas pour moi d'être convaincu que le pacte faustien, Mephistophelical pact, when they say give up on your individual freedom and exchange will give you some economic progress. It doesn't work for me. The question is going to work for other young ones around the world? And I think it's for us, democracies, liberal capitalists, the ones who believe in freedom, that we have to renew our own social contract, our own economic model, the sense of dignity of people in our societies. And then, et après ça, je crois que les autres vont renouveler leur désir d'avoir la démocratie, le libéralisme et les valeurs que nous partageons. Merci pour la question. Et endgame. I think we have no right whatsoever to tell Ukraine which are the terms in which they will settle, because one day this war will be over. Cannot say when, probably be long and difficult. I think they have no right in the world to tell the brave Ukrainian people what's the best interest for them. You have to support them to win. And then, of course, the realities, the calculation will indicate to all sides which will be the dimension. But when we say nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, we mean it. Will be I think, morally bankrupt for us to tell one independent nation how much land should they abandon in exchange for an illusory peace. Because Russia might regroup, buy some time, and come back again. And then what will do? So that's something that Ukrainians have to decide, will be on their side, and it's up to them to decide how to define peace, how to define victory, how to define their future.
Muriel, the last words.
Merci. Last points on my part. One on deterrence, especially on the eastern flank. One on West against the West. One on endgame in Ukraine. Madame qui vient de Lituanie. It might sound as maybe contre-intuitive to you, but the reality is deterrence worked when it comes to the countries of this alliance. Intimidation against NATO countries have decreased rather than increased since the beginning of the war. C'est une réalité cruelle. Les Ukrainiens évidemment subissent des attaques atroces. But the reality, so we were not able to dissuade Russia from attacking Ukraine. You might know that dissuade has a different meaning in French than deter. Dissuade, ça veut dire décourager. Donc on n'a pas réussi à décourager la Russie d'agresser l'Ukraine, mais on a réussi à deter Russia from attacking any inch or even intimidating any inch of the alliance territory. The reality is, again, the intimidations have decreased. Also because of reinforcements on the eastern flank. I might have mentioned earlier, sir, that France was present in Estonia. As you might know, it stayed in Estonia after the beginning of the war, while we were meant to rotate. As of the 25th of February, we overflew the Polish sky with Rafale just on the border to check that they would not be confronted with intimidations, and our air detachment in Lithuania just left Lithuania and will be back in December. So transfers of solidarity with a reinforced presence on the eastern flank, also financial solidarity to countries that, including Poland, that host Ukrainian refugees. And while this part of Europe is exposed and rightfully is asking for solidarity because it is vulnerable, we should stay clear-minded. Deterrence worked. and Russia has not managed to even escalate and threaten those countries. To West and the rest. I presume, sir, you are, where is the gentleman that asked this question? Maybe he's from India, I suppose. What is India's interest? I'm speaking under your control. Probably not to live in a world where might is right et où c'est le droit du plus fort qui prévaut. Vous connaissez sans doute la citation de Pascal. On a intérêt à vivre dans un monde où prévaut la force du droit et pas le droit du plus fort. Et ça, c'est pas seulement une question de morale, c'est une question d'intérêt. Et donc, comme le disait Mircea, it's for us to hear and realize that yes, it is seen from others' perspectives that the West is applying double standards and everything, but it goes the other way around. Where is the middle ground, as we say sometimes, countries' interest? Certainly not to set a precedent, also because of China. 3, the endgame in Ukraine. I can testify that no one is pressuring Ukraine to accelerate any sort of endgame. The Ukrainians have wowed us so far. We're expecting the counteroffensive with our support to achieve gains. We will do everything possible to support Ukraine. Putin will not wait us out. We are organizing ourselves as Europeans to sustain our support to Ukraine. Also thanks to Prime Minister Kallas's initiative on the EU side, we are organizing ourselves, but also in a way that, of course, benefits to our industrial base, and this is key to our citizens. If we are to spend more, and this is going to be my conclusion again, your generation has to understand that there is a cost for defense. Security does not come for free, and the best way to ensure America's presence at our sides for the security of Europe, also in support to Ukraine, is certainly not, c'est comme dans un couple, on dit pas reste, je t'en supplie. On se tient debout et soi-même on contribue, on regarde dans une direction. So also for the sake of burden sharing, I would join Mircea on that. Show me the money, show me the efforts. Et encore une fois, je parle aux futurs, the future taxpayers should be aware that your security will not come for free. So yes, be prepared. Your generation will have to pay for the recapitalization of our welfare state, of our education, of our defense. And I realize this is a complicated equation. But the good news is you have the EU and this French president, and I want to praise my president and on that, has convinced other countries in Europe to go for further capacity for European pour des financements européens. So the answer lies in the EU. Et je crois que c'est le combat de votre génération. Si on veut des marges, il faut les trouver à l'Union européenne.
Well, that was the end of a conversation that no doubt merits to be continued. So we will put a TBC on this conversation. Thank you very much. I want to thank also Bruno Caticuli, your professor, who's at the heart of bringing those two great guest speakers today, Mircea, Geoana, Muriel, Domenach. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Et à la prochaine.